One of Nintendo's biggest releases for the year will be Pokemon Legends ZA, the follow-up to the surprise 2022 rethinking of the Pokemon franchise in Pokemon Legends Arceus. Arceus was a breath of fresh air for a franchise that had long since been crying out for a change from the shackles of routine, and it instantly went on to become one of the most beloved and popular Pokemon games of all time as a result. Now, 4.5 years later, we are getting a full follow-up to that game. But where it would have been very easy for Game Freak and the Pokemon Company to just simply reskin Arceus and push out more of what players already loved, they have taken a very different tactic with Legends ZA, which seems to be following in Arceus' footsteps by keeping alive its spirit of experimentation and shaking things up quite a bit, but going in completely different directions in the process. Here are 10 critical differences between Legends ZA and Legends Arceus. The setting. The most obvious and immediate difference between Legends Arceus and ZA is the setting, in that the two games go in entirely diametrically opposite directions with their respective settings. Arceus was set in the wilderness, in the untamed expanses of the Sinnoh region, and had players struggling to survive for themselves as they tried to explore, understand, and tame the wildlife. Legends ZA, on the other hand, is set entirely in one city, Lumiose City, from 2013's Pokemon X and Y. This makes this the very first Pokemon game ever to take place in an entirely urban expanse, and makes ZA instantly different from its predecessor. Focus on trainer battles. The other big difference, where Legends Arceus emphasized capturing Pokemon, to that extent that catching Pokemon was built into the main story of that game, ZA actually focuses on battling. One of the main objectives in the story is to climb the battle ranks as a trainer, from Z rank all the way up to A, and the way you do that is by getting into lots and even more trainer battles throughout Lumiose City, and winning, hopefully. You will still be catching Pokemon, of course, obviously. There are whole wild zones set up within Lumiose City for that exact purpose, to be clear, but it no longer appears to be the central overarching goal for players like it was in Arceus. Multiplayer. This focus on trainer battles also means that ZA is far more focused on multiplayer than Legends Arceus ever was. Fans of that game may remember that while it did technically include online functionality, it was restricted mostly to trading with friends, which tied in well with that game's focus on catching and completing the Pokédex. ZA is going to be more robust with its multiplayer functionality, with full support for PvP battles for 2 to 4 players, including ranked and some unranked modes. In fact, as of right now, there appears to be at least some key Pokemon that are impossible to access unless you participate in the multiplayer battles, so it is decidedly a bigger focus this time around. Battle system. Now, we've spoken so much about the emphasis on trainer battles, but we haven't actually talked about how the battles will work. Just like Legends Arceus represented the biggest shakeup for the series' long-standing battle system to date, with its blend of real-time and turn-based elements, as well as the addition of agile and strong styles, ZA represents an even bigger departure from the norm. The game, for the very first time in the series' history, ditches turn-based battles entirely, instead embracing real-time fights, with individual attacks mapped to cooldowns. This represents a complete reconception of the central conceit of how Pokemon games are supposed to play, for the first time in, well, ever. Set after X and Y. Speaking of the differences in the setting, they extend not only to geography, but also to chronology. You see, Legends Arceus was a prequel, taking place hundreds of years before any mainline Pokemon game, and following the early establishment of the Sinnoh region. Legends ZA, on the other hand, appears to be a sequel to X and Y, and the very first adventures we had in the Kalos region. While this won't be possible to be completely sure on until after the game is actually out and has been played, there are several characters in the game who at least appear to be returning from X and Y, and who are looking way older now than they did before, of course, implying this game is set after those ones. Mega Evolutions. Taking place in Kalos also means the return of the signature mechanic that Pokemon X and Y, the first game set in the Kalos region, introduced, namely Mega Evolutions. The fan-favorite mechanic, which sees Pokemon temporarily achieve a stronger, more powerful enhanced state in battles, returns for the very first time in almost a decade. Legends Arceus obviously lacked Mega Evolutions entirely, so their presence in ZA will make for an instant change in how players approach team building this time around. DLC. The first Legends game was a big success, to be sure, as evidenced by the fact that it is getting a direct follow-up, which is getting placement as the prime holiday release this year, unlike the first game, which was unceremoniously shoved out the door in an awkward release spot in the middle of 2 other games. The success of the first game caught both Nintendo and the Pokemon Company off guard, and they both mentioned how they had not expected it to be as popular as it actually turned out to be. This was best evidenced by the fact that the game, which players loved, and which had so many obvious hooks to be expanded with post-launch content, never quite got any real meaningful DLC. Legends ZA, on the other hand, will be getting DLC. In fact, it's already been announced, a whole month before the game is actually even out. Switch 2. The original Legends, launching in early 2022, was a Nintendo Switch game. It ran fairly poorly on the system. I mean, not as bad as Pokemon Scarlet and Violet would, just under a year later, but still fairly poorly all the same. When the Switch 2 came out earlier this year, Legends Arceus did not get any free or paid upgrades for Switch 2 enhancements either. Now, that is not going to be the case for Legends ZA, which is Switch 2 enhanced, and is getting a whole Switch 2 edition released alongside its regular Switch version. In fact, Legends ZA is going to be the next bundled game to come with the Switch 2 starting this October, replacing Mario Kart World in fact. Running the game on the Switch 2 will make Legends ZA the first Pokemon game to run in full 60 frames per second at launch in over a decade. The last time a Pokemon game ran at a constant 60 FPS was Pokemon Emerald on the GBA way back in 2005. The starters. Every Pokemon game sees you picking from one of 3 starters when you set out on your journey, and the trio you pick from changes in every game as well, although of course each game sticks to the fire, water, grass typing triangle. Legends Arceus had you start out with either Oshawott, Cyndaquil, or Rowlet. In ZA you pick between Chikorita, Totodile, and Tepig. It remains to be seen whether those Pokemon will get any new exclusive regional forms or Mega Evolutions in ZA, like Oshawott, Cyndaquil, and Rowlet's final evolutions did in Legends Arceus. Pokemon Home. Like every other Pokemon game released since the Switch era, Legends ZA will support Pokemon Home, but there are several catches here, for the first time since the service's introduction. For starters, much like happens with pretty much every new Pokemon release, home support will not be present at launch, but will be added sometime after, currently promised at least for 2026. But the new caveat is that Pokemon that are sent from home into ZA may not be possible to retrieve back, so it's worth keeping that in mind. Nintendo and Game Freak warn that the data structure of the Pokemon will change upon being sent into ZA, presumably because of the completely new battle and stat systems being used, and this may break compatibility with the other Pokemon games as a result. So if you are choosing to bring in any Pokemon into ZA, beware of the risks involved. So what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.